Under the blood moon's unblinking gaze, a single drop of crimson traced the curve of her lip, whispering secrets long buried in the frost. The wind howled through the jagged peaks of the Ironfang Mountains, carrying the scent of pine and decay, as if the earth itself mourned the fall of forgotten empires. Ilara shivered in the dim torchlight of the auction block, her bare feet numb against the icy stone platform that jutted like a fang from the cliffside. The air was thick with the metallic tang of blood, old blood, spilled in rituals no one remembered, and the low growls of the gathered crowd, a motley assembly of shifters, outcasts, and shadowed figures who traded in flesh and fate. She was no stranger to rejection. Her pack had cast her out seasons ago, branding her a curse for the visions that plagued her dreams, murmurs in a tongue that twisted like thorns in her mind. "Freak," they had snarled, their alpha's claws raking her shoulder as they drove her into the wilderness, leaving her to the mercy of the blizzards and beasts. But mercy was a myth in these lands, where the weak were sold like trinkets to the highest bidder. Ilara pulled her tattered cloak tighter, the fabric threadbare from endless nights of flight. The cloak's hood shadowed her face, but it could not hide the faint scar across her collarbone, a jagged line from her excommunication, glowing faintly silver under the moon's pale fire. It was her only inheritance from the pack, a mark of shame that pulsed with every heartbeat, reminding her of the warmth she had once known, now frozen into isolation. Around her neck hung the symbol that had sealed her doom, a small, obsidian pendant etched with swirling runes, cool as grave soil against her skin. She had found it half buried in the snow after a vision, its weight both anchor and curse. The pack elders had called it blasphemy, a relic from the undead wars, but Ilara knew better. In her dreams, it spoke to her in a language of silk and shadow, words that slithered like smoke, promising truths the living feared. The auctioneer's voice boomed over the gale, his breath fogging the air like a specter's sigh. Lot 13, Ilara of the Silverclaw remnants, Omega Wolf, untouched by mate bond, with the gift or curse of tongues lost to time. Bidding starts at 50 silver fangs. Laughter rippled through the crowd, harsh as cracking ice. Ilara's stomach churned, the cold seeping into her bones, making her vision blur at the edges. She had survived the wilds by scavenging roots and hunting rabbits under starless skies. But this was a deeper exile. Sold like chattel to slake some bidder's whim, her spirit reduced to barter in a world that devoured its own. Bids flew like arrows. A burly bear shifter offered 60, his eyes gleaming with crude intent. A sly fox merchant countered with 70, muttering of using her for trade secrets. Ilara's heart pounded, a frantic drum against her ribs, each beat echoing the Wivios distance that haunted her nights, wolves calling to a moon that never answered. She clenched her fists, nails biting into palms, drawing pinpricks of blood that warmed her chilled skin. Why her? The gods, or the demons, had woven her fate with threads of isolation, her omega nature a chain rather than a gift. No alpha had claimed her. Her scent, laced with that ancient whisper, repelled them all. She was adrift, a ghost in fur, yearning for the pack's fire she could no longer share. Then, silence fell like a shroud. From the shadowed fringes of the gathering emerged a figure cloaked in midnight velvet, his presence sucking the warmth from the air. The crowd parted without a word, instincts bowing to ancient fear. He was tall, his frame lean yet commanding, silver hair catching the moonlight like frost on a blade. His eyes, crimson-ringed obsidian, fixed on Ilara with an intensity that pierced her soul, stirring something primal, a pull she could not name. Whispers rippled. The vampire king, Draven of the eternal court, he who had not graced mortal auctions in centuries. Cursed, they said, by a betrayal that turned his heart to ash, his kingdom crumbling under the weight of endless night. 1,000 gold eclipses, his voice intoned, smooth as spilled wine, laced with the finality of a grave's echo. No one dared counter. The auctioneer stammered acceptance, chains clinking as they bound Ilara's wrists, not roughly, but with the inevitability of destiny. She met Draven's gaze, her breath catching at the sorrow etched in his features, a melancholy that mirrored her own exile. He did not smile, did not gloat. Instead, he extended a gloved hand, the leather stained faintly with what might have been old blood. As they led her from the platform into the swirling snow, the pendant at her throat warmed for the first time, its runes flickering like embers in the dark. Ilara's mind raced, fear twisting with an unwelcome curiosity. What need had a king of the undead for a wolf's tongue? The wind whipped her cloak, tearing at the edges, and in that moment, under the blood moon's watchful eye, she felt the first stirrings of a bond, forged not in warmth, but in the chill of shared shadows. The mountains loomed, eternal sentinels to secrets unspoken, and Ilara wondered if this purchase was salvation or the final verse of her tragedy. The carriage rattled over frozen ruts, a black lacquered beast drawn by steeds whose eyes glowed like dying coals in the night. Ilara huddled in the corner, her wrists still bound by silken cords that chafed less than iron, but held her all the same. The air inside was heavy with the scent of aged leather and something sharper, coppery, like blood long congealed. Draven sat opposite, his form a silhouette against the frost-etched window where moonlight clawed at the glass like desperate fingers. He had not spoken since the auction, his gaze fixed on the passing shadows of the Iron Fang peaks, but she felt his awareness like a weight on her skin, probing, unyielding. The pendant at her throat burned now, a steady pulse against her racing heart, its obsidian surface warming as if alive. She shifted, the cloak falling open to reveal the scar on her collarbone, silver and throbbing in rhythm with the artifact. Why did it stir for him? In her visions, the runes had whispered of ancient pacts, languages etched in the veins of the undead, tongues that the living could not utter without shattering. Her pack had feared it, called her tainted for hearing echoes of the grave. And now this king of eternal night had claimed her, not with lust or cruelty, but with a quiet desperation that mirrored her own fractured soul. The wind outside howled, a mournful dirge that seeped through the cracks, carrying flecks of snow that danced like spectral ash. Ilara's breath fogged before her, her body trembling from the cold that no fire could fully banish. She had known exile's bite, the endless treks through blizzards, the gnawing hunger that twisted her insides. But this was different. Proximity to him stirred instincts long dormant. An Omega's pull toward alpha strength, twisted here into something darker, forbidden. Her wolf whined within, urging flight, yet curiosity rooted her, a dangerous bloom in barren soil. Draven's eyes flicked to her at last, crimson rims flaring in the dimness. "You tremble," he said, his voice a low rumble, like thunder trapped in velvet. Not a question, but an observation, laced with the weariness of centuries. He removed his glove with deliberate slowness, revealing a hand pale as marble, veins threading like rivers of ink beneath the surface. No warmth emanated from him. Instead, a chill radiated, drawing the heat from her very breath. "I'm cold," Ilara replied, her words clipped, defiant, despite the fear coiling in her gut. She met his stare, searching for the monster the whispers promised, but found only hollows, eyes that had witnessed empires crumble to dust, a king burdened by chains invisible. The carriage lurched, and she braced against the seat, the pendant swinging forward, catching the moonlight in a flash of runes. He leaned closer, the motion fluid, predatory, yet restrained. His fingers hovered near the necklace, not touching, as if it were a flame he dared not grasp. "That relic, it calls to you." His tone held no accusation, only a raw hunger, the kind born of isolation. I bought you for what it unlocks in you." Ilara's pulse thundered, the scar on her collarbone igniting like frostfire. Instinct screamed to recoil, to bare teeth and flee into the storm. But the connection hummed between them, instinctive, unwelcome. Fear warred with curiosity. Why a vampire king, cursed they said by betrayal in his own shadowed court, would seek a wolf's exile? She had dreamed of such tongues, fragments of a dead language slithering through her mind like smoke from a pyre, words of silk and shadow that promised power or perdition. "You think I'm a key to your secrets," she whispered, her voice steadying as the wolf within rose, protective. "But I'm no one's tool, not the pack's, not yours." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, bitter as winter's edge. "No tool, Ilara of Silverclaw. A bridge." He withdrew, the space between them widening, yet the air thickened with unspoken truths. Outside, the wind's howl crescendoed. Vivios distantes answering from the peaks. Wolves or phantoms, she could not tell. The carriage slowed, wheels crunching over deeper snow, and Draven's posture shifted, alert, his hand drifting to the hilt of a dagger at his belt, its pommel etched with faded crescents. "Ambush!" her senses screamed. The night erupted in chaos. Shadows lunged from the tree line. Cloaked figures with eyes gleaming feral, rivals from the auction's underbelly or worse, emissaries from his fracturing court. A blade whistled, embedding in the carriage door with a thud that vibrated through her bones. Draven moved like liquid night, bursting through the door into the fray, his form a blur of midnight cloak and flashing steel. Blood sprayed dark and viscous, staining the snow in crimson blooms that steamed under the moon's gaze. Ilara's bonds snapped under her straining strength, Omega fury igniting as she spilled out into the cold. The pendant blazed, runes illuminating the scene in eerie silver light. One attacker, a hulking shifter with bearish bulk, lunged at her, claws extended, reeking of greed and rot. She dodged, the wind whipping her hair like a banner, and in that instant, words tumbled from her lips unbidden, a guttural chant in the dead tongue, sharp as shattered glass. The bear staggered, clutching his throat as if invisible thorns choked him, collapsing into the snow with a gurgle. Draven dispatched another with lethal grace, his blade drinking deep. But a third struck true, a poisoned dart grazing his shoulder, drawing a hiss of pain that echoed her own buried wounds. He faltered, crimson eyes dimming, and Ilara acted without thought, dragging him toward a nearby cavern mouth, yawning in the cliffside like a forgotten maw. The storm raged, burying their tracks in white veils as she pulled him into the shelter of stone and shadow. Inside, the air was still, heavy with the mineral tang of earth and the faint echo of dripping water. Ilara tore a strip from her cloak, pressing it to his wound, her hands steady despite the tremor in her soul. His blood was cool, slick as oil, but it warmed on her skin, mingling with her own pulse. "Why protect me?" she demanded, her voice a whisper in the gloom, curiosity overriding fear. He watched her, that melancholy gaze softening, the first crack in his armored exile. "Because in your voice I hear what I have lost," he murmured, the confession hanging like mist. The pendant cooled against her chest, a silent witness, as empathy flickered, fragile, nascent, between the rejected wolf and the shadowed king. Outside, the wind mourned their fragile truce, Vivios fading into silence, while the moon above bore witness to bonds forged in blood and frost. And now I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments of the night they find you. The cavern's breath was a slow, earthen sigh, exhaling damp chill that clung to Ilara's skin like a lover's reluctant farewell. She knelt beside Draven, the torn strip of her cloak now sodden with his blood, its metallic tang sharp against the musty stone. The wound on his shoulder wept slowly, the poison's venom threading black veins beneath his pale flesh, a map of corruption that mirrored the fractures in her own spirit. Outside, the storm's fury battered the entrance, a veil of white rage that muffled the world. But within these walls, silence pressed heavy, broken only by the drip of unseen water and the ragged cadence of her breath. Ilara's hands trembled as she bound the makeshift bandage tighter, her fingers brushing the cool marble of his skin. No warmth stirred there, only the faint thrum of an undead pulse, eternal yet hollow. The pendant at her throat hummed softly, its runes casting erratic silver flickers across his face, illuminating the sharp angles of his jaw, the faint lines of sorrow etched like frost cracks. She had never touched a vampire before, not in the wilds where her pack's tales painted them as soulless predators, thieves of life under moonless skies. Yet here he lay, vulnerable, his crimson-ringed eyes half-lidded, watching her with the intensity that peeled back her defenses layer by layer. "Why does it burn for you?" Draven's voice emerged low, threaded with pain, each word a labored exhale. He did not flinch from her touch, but his gaze fixed on the obsidian relic, hunger and reverence warring in its depths. "That tongue you spoke, it felled the bear without a blade, a language my kind forged in the blood wars, sealed away when the last speakers fell to dust. Only echoes remain, mocking us from the shadows." Ilara paused, her scarred collarbone aching in sympathy, the silver mark pulsing as if the moon itself tugged at her veins. She had always hidden the visions, the slithering words that invaded her dreams like smoke from a distant pyre, promises of forgotten pacts, bindings between wolf and shadow that her pack deemed heresy. Exile had taught her silence, but in this king's presence the dam cracked. "It found me in the snow," she murmured, her voice a whisper against the cavern's gloom. "After they cast me out. The elders said it was cursed, that my hearing it made me broken, unworthy of the pack's fire." The memory clawed at her, the alpha's snarl, claws rending flesh, the howls of her former kin fading into the blizzard as she staggered alone, blood freezing in her fur. Draven's hand rose, gloved fingers grazing the pendant's edge, not claiming but seeking. A spark jumped between them, electric and cold, sending visions flashing through her mind, crumbling spires of obsidian under a fractured moon, betrayal's blade in a trusted brother's hand, a kingdom's heart torn asunder by ambition's greed. She gasped, pulling back, the cavern spinning as the dead tongue stirred unbidden on her lips. "Vespera, noctis vincula," she breathed, the words tasting of ash and iron, unlocking fragments of his curse. A ritual gone awry, a rival's poison that bound his court in endless night, stripping him of allies, leaving him a monarch adrift in guilt's endless winter. He stiffened, eyes widening, the crimson rims flaring like embers in dying coals. "You speak it true," he rasped, wonder bleeding into his tone, a crack in the armor of his melancholy. For the first time, vulnerability softened his features, revealing the man beneath the king, the one who had wandered shadowed halls for centuries, haunted by the faces of those he could not save. No living soul has uttered it since the fall. It was meant to bind eternals to the earth, but treachery twisted it into chains. My court fractures because of it. Whispers of rebellion echo in the crypts, pulling my people toward war. Empathy bloomed in Ilara's chest, unwelcome yet insistent, a warmth piercing the cavern's chill. She saw her own exile reflected in his isolation, the pack's rejection a pale echo of his betrayal, both wounds festering under dutiful masks. Her wolf whined within, instincts warring, flee the undead's grasp or lean into this fragile bridge. The air thickened with the scent of his blood, mingling with the earthy damp, and she pressed her palm to his chest, feeling the unnatural stillness beneath. "You bought me as a weapon," she said, not accusing, but seeking truth in the dim light. To wield against your enemies, but what of me? Am I to be your salvation, or just another ghost in your endless night? Draven's gaze held hers, the melancholy deepening, a storm of unspoken burdens. I sought a key, Alara, not a slave, the language. It died with my kin, but in you it lives, a wolf's voice to unravel the undead's knots. His fingers closed gently over hers, the contact sending shivers through her, not of fear but of recognition. A bond forming in the crucible of shared shadows, instinctive yet resisted. She should pull away, rationalize this pull as omega folly, a desperate grasp at connection in exile's void. Yet curiosity anchored her, the pendant's warmth spreading like tentative fire, thawing the ice around her heart. A distant rumble shook the cavern walls, snow avalanching at the entrance, sealing them deeper into isolation. The attacker's remnants, or worse, emissaries from his court. Drawn by the tongue's echo? Draven tensed, drawing her closer in a protective arc, his form a shield of midnight and steel. The wind's howl infiltrated, carrying faint wevios, wolves or phantoms calling through the storm. In that moment, as peril loomed, empathy forged into something stronger, a vow unspoken, born of necessity and the quiet terror of aloneness. Alara's breath synced with his, the cavern a womb of stone and secret, where rejection's scars began to weave into redemption's thread. But as the echoes faded, doubt gnawed at her. Could she trust this king, whose touch promised healing yet reeked of eternal night? The moon's light filtered through cracks above, silvering their entwined forms, a silent question hanging in the air. What price for a bond sealed in blood and forgotten words? The cavern's shadows deepened as the avalanche settled, a white tomb sealing Alara and Draven in their fragile sanctuary, the world outside reduced to muffled fury. The air grew thicker, laced with the acrid bite of his poisoned blood and the faint mineral whisper of ancient stone, as if the mountain itself held its breath, waiting for the unraveling. Alara's hand lingered on his chest, the unnatural stillness beneath her palm a stark contrast to the wild thrum of her own heart, her omega instincts clawing at the edges of her resolve. She should fear him. The Vampire King's touch, cool as grave mist, stirring visions that blurred the line between salvation and surrender. Yet in his crimson-ringed eyes, she saw not predation, but a mirror to her exile, a soul adrift, burdened by betrayals that echoed her pack's scorn. Draven's breath, if it could be called that, came in shallow rasps, the poison weaving its dark threads deeper into his veins, blackening the elegant lines of his form like ink spilled on parchment. He shifted, wincing, his gloved hand tightening over hers in a grip that was both anchor and plea. "The words you spoke, they pierced the veil," he murmured, his voice a velvet rasp frayed by pain, carrying the weight of centuries unspoken. "But there's more. The curse binds not just my body, but the very language of my bloodline. To break it, the tongue must be invoked fully, under the blood moon's gaze, with a speaker untainted by our shadows." Ilara's scar burned along her collarbone, a silver fire sinking with the pendant's insistent pulse, its obsidian surface now hot against her skin, runes etching glowing paths like veins of starlight. She pulled back slightly, the cavern's chill rushing in to fill the space between them. But the connection hummed, insistent, drawing her wolf's essence to the surface. Fear coiled in her gut, rationalizing this pull as mere survival's delusion, a rejected omega grasping at the first shadow that offered shelter. Yet curiosity bloomed, treacherous and tender, born from the shared chill of isolation. Her pack had branded her broken for these gifts, driving her into the wilds where blizzards clawed at her fur and hunger gnawed like a traitor's blade. What if this relic, this curse, was not her doom, but her destiny? The pendant flared brighter, unbidden, and Alara's vision swam. The cavern walls dissolved into fragments of memory, not hers, but his, flooding her mind like a breached dam. She saw towering spires of black crystal under a fractured sky, the eternal court's heart where vampires once wove pacts with the night. Draven, younger in eternal years, his silver hair unbound, standing beside a brother in blood. Lord Thorn, eyes gleaming with false loyalty. Betrayal unfolded in visceral strokes. Thorn's dagger, silver-tipped with lunar poison, plunging into Draven's back during a ritual to seal the court's power. The dead language twisted then, words of binding turned to chains, cursing Draven to wander as a king without throne, his people fracturing into warring factions, whispers of rebellion echoing through crypts like Weavios in the wind. Gasping, Ilara clutched the pendant, the runes searing her palm as the full invocation tore from her throat. Vespera noctis, vincula fracta, sanguis aeternum liber. The words slithered out, sharp and silken, tasting of iron and frost, reverberating off the stone like thunder trapped in silk. The air crackled, silver light exploding from the relic, illuminating the cavern in ethereal glow. Draven arched, a guttural cry escaping him as the black veins receded, the poison hissing like steam from his flesh, evaporating into wisps of shadow that fled toward the sealed entrance. He collapsed back, chest heaving with borrowed breath, his eyes locking onto hers with raw revelation. The melancholy that had cloaked him cracked wide, exposing the king beneath, the ethical guardian who had borne his court's decay alone, guilt etching deeper than any blade. "You are the key," he whispered, wonder threading his tone like moonlight on snow, his hand rising to trace the scar on her collarbone, gentle as a winter's first flake. Not just a speaker, Ilara, a pathfinder. The language chose you, a wolf's pure voice to unbind what the undead corrupted. My brother's treachery sealed us in night eternal. But you bring the dawn's edge. Empathy surged through her, visceral and unresisted now, thawing the ice of her exile. She saw the parallels etched in blood and frost, her pack's rejection for a gift they feared, his court's fracture from ambition's greed. The pendant cooled, its light fading to a steady ember, but the bond solidified, instinctive pull weaving into something profound. A recognition that her hidden power was no curse, but the thread to mend shattered fates. Tears pricked her eyes, hot against the cavern's damp, as she leaned closer, the scent of his healing blood mingling with her own warmth, a fragile fire in the gloom. Yet doubt lingered, a shadow at the revelation's edge. Outside, the storm's howl crescendoed, carrying the distant clash of steel, pursuers from his court, drawn by the invocation's echo or remnants of the ambush seeking vengeance. Draven rose unsteadily, drawing her to her feet, his form a shield once more, midnight cloak swirling like wings. "They come for the key they sense," he said, voice steadying with purpose, the guilt in his eyes yielding to resolve. Thorn's spies, no doubt, weaving war from the ruins. But with you, I can reclaim what was lost. Not through conquest, but redemption. Alara's heart pounded, the wolf within howling in tandem with the wind, torn between flight and this newfound purpose. The cavern trembled, snow cracking at the entrance, and as peril closed in, she realized the truth. Her dom was no isolated whisper, but the bridge between worlds, her rejection the forge for a king's rebirth. In his gaze, she found not ownership, but partnership, a choice looming, moral and raw, between the freedom of solitude and the compassion of union. The first boulders tumbled, light piercing the white veil, and Draven's hand clasped hers, cool strength intertwining with her fire. What is strength, if not choosing to heal the wounds that mirror your own? Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. The cavern mouth shattered under the assault of steel and sorcery. snow exploding inward like the breath of an enraged beast, flooding the dim sanctuary with blinding white and the acrid reek of gunpowder mingled with arcane frost. Ilara's hand tightened in Draven's, her pulse a wild drum against his cool grasp, the obsidian pendant swinging between them like a pendulum of fate, its runes flickering erratically as if sensing the storm of shadows converging. The air thickened with the metallic tang of blood, fresh now, spilled in the fray beyond, and the low snarls of intruders, a chorus that clawed at her omega instincts, urging both fight and flight in equal measure. Draven pulled her behind a jagged outcrop of stone, his form a blur of midnight cloak and drawn blade, the dagger's pommel catching moonlight in silver crescents that danced like dying stars. His crimson eyes scanned the breach, resolve hardening the melancholy lines of his face, but she caught the flicker of guilt there, the weight of a king who had dragged another soul into his fractured legacy. "Stay low," he commanded, voice a low thunder, yet laced with the tenderness of their nascent bond, a plea wrapped in authority. Ilara nodded, her scar throbbing along her collarbone, silver fire sinking with the pendant's heat, but her wolf surged within, no longer content to cower. Exile had forged her into something sharper than prey. The dead tongue stirred on her lips, unbidden, promising power she had long feared. Figures spilled through the widening gap, 5 in all, cloaked in ragged furs and etched armor that gleamed with the insignia of the Eternal Court, twisted thorns encircling a fractured moon. At their fore strode Lord Thorn, Draven's blood brother turned betrayer, his features a cruel echo of the king's. Silver hair cropped short, eyes burning with the same obsidian depths, but rimmed in venomous gold. Flanking him were shifters, hulking betas from scattered packs, their scents laced with the wild rot of mercenaries, bears and wolves bought with promises of territory in the coming war. And among them, a face from Ilara's shadowed past, Garrick, her former alpha, broad-shouldered and scarred, his muzzle twisted in a snarl that reeked of old grudges. He had led the excommunication, his claws the ones that marked her, casting her into the wilds for the blasphemy of her visions. "You hide like vermin in the earth, brother," Thorn sneered, his voice silk over shattered glass, stepping forward with predatory grace, a curved saber dripping ethereal blue ichor, the lunar poison that had nearly claimed Draven twice over. Snow crunched under his boots, the wind whipping flurries that stung like needles, carrying distant weavios from the peaks as if the mountains themselves mourned the collision of worlds. The court senses the invocation. The key you stole from the auction. Hand her over, and perhaps I'll let you rot in peace rather than drag you to the pyre. Draven rose, shielding Ilara with his body, the cavern's chill radiating from him like an extension of his eternal night. Blood trickled from a fresh gash on his forearm, staining the stone in dark rivulets that steamed faintly, but his stance was unyielding, the ethical core of his kingship flaring against the betrayal's scar. "You twisted the binding, Thorn, for power, for a throne built on our kin's ashes. She is no key to hoard. She is the voice to unmake your chains." His gaze flicked to Garrick, recognition sharpening the air. "And you, Wolf Lord of Silverclaw, come to reclaim what you discarded, or to sell her silence to the highest shadow?" Garrick's laugh was a guttural bark, echoing off the walls like cracking ice, his eyes raking over Ilara with possessive hunger, the alpha's instinct undimmed by time or shame. She was always tainted, that one, hearing ghosts in the wind, babbling curses that drove our hunts to ruin. We left her for the snows, but fate's a cruel bitch, delivering her to you, bloodsucker. Thorn promises land if we drag her back, broken or not. The pack needs no pathfinder. We need warriors for the wars your kind ignites. Ilara's blood roared in her ears, the pendant blazing against her chest, its warmth a counterpoint to the cavern's encroaching frost. Memories flooded her. The pack's fire circle, warm and mocking as they turned away, Garrick's claws rending her flesh under the moon's indifferent gaze, the howls of kin fading into blizzard's embrace. Rejection's wound tore open, raw and visceral, mingling with the empathy she had forged with Draven in this very gloom. She stepped forward, ignoring his warning grasp, the dead tongue coiling in her throat like smoke, ready to ignite. You cast me out for fear, Garrick. Called my gift a curse because it whispered truths you couldn't face, the borders weakening, the old pacts fraying. But it's no weapon for your greed. Her voice steadied, the words gaining strength from the bond at her side, instinctive pull resisting the rational urge to flee into solitude's freedom. Thorn lunged first, saber whistling through the air, blue ichor trailing like comet's tail. Draven parried, steel clashing in sparks that illuminated the cavern in fleeting fire, the impact reverberating through Alara's bones. Garrick charged her, claws extended, reeking of pine and rage, but she met him with the invocation's echo. Noctis umbra, recede. The runes on the pendant erupted in silver light, the words lashing out like invisible thorns, forcing him back with a yelp, his form staggering as spectral shadows coiled around his limbs, binding without breaking skin. Pain etched his face, not just physical, but the dawning horror of her power. The Omega he had discarded, now a force unraveling his dominance. The Betas swarmed, chaos erupting in snarls and blade song, blood spraying in crimson arcs that painted the snow red under slivers of moonlight piercing the breach. Draven fought with lethal precision, his movements a dance of shadow and sorrow, dispatching one with a thrust that pierced heart deep. But Thorn's poison grazed him again, drawing a hiss that twisted Alara's gut. She invoked once more, the tongue flowing freer now, felling a bear shifter mid-leap, his body crumpling like felled timber. Yet each word drained her, the pendant's heat searing her skin, a reminder of the cost. Her essence poured into mending a world that had rejected her. As the fray peaked, Thorn pinned Draven against the wall, saber at his throat, gold-rimmed eyes gleaming with triumph. Forgive me, brother, or watch your court burn in the war I've sown. Garrick circled Alara, opportunistic, his offer a growl. Join me, return to the pack. Forget this undead folly, be free of chains. The moral crux loomed, sharp as the wind's howl infiltrating the cavern, carrying the moon's pale judgment. Love or freedom? Draven's gaze met hers across the melee, crimson depths pleading not for victory, but choice. His guilt a silent vow that union meant sharing burdens, not submission. Forgiveness or war? Thorn's betrayal mirrored Garrick's scorn, both demanding her as tool, but Draven offered redemption's fragile path. Alara's heart fractured, the wolf within torn. Solitude's liberty, running eternal under indifferent skies, or the compassion of healing wounds that echoed her own, risking all for a bond born in frost and forgotten words. She chose, the pendant flaring like a dying sun, the invocation building on her lips, a dilemma not of blade, but soul, as the cavern trembled with the weight of what came next. What is forgiveness, if not the strength to unbind the betrayer within us all? The cavern quaked under the fury of clashing wills, snow and stone crumbling like the remnants of shattered oaths, as Alara stood at the precipice of her fractured world. The pendant scorched her chest, a living ember against the encroaching frost, its runes pulsing in rhythm with the blood moon's distant glow filtering through the breached entrance. Thorn's saber hovered at Draven's throat, the blue ichor dripping like venomous tears onto the king's collarbone, while Garrick's claws gleamed inches from her own skin, his breath hot and ragged, reeking of the pack's old betrayals. The air hummed with the dead tongue's residue, shadows coiling like spectral wolves at the edges of the fray, and Alara felt the weight of choices past crashing upon her. The pack's exile, a wound that had festered into isolation. Draven's quiet guardianship, a bridge built from guilt's cold stone. Her heart thundered, Omega instincts warring with the rational chill of self-preservation. the wolf within howling for the freedom of endless wilds, unburdened by bonds that could shatter anew. Garrick's eyes bored into her, alpha dominance laced with desperate hunger, his voice a gravelly plea masked as command. "Come back, Ilara. The pack waits. No more ghosts, no more wandering. Leave the bloodsucker to his crypts. Be whole with your own." Thorn's laugh slithered through the din, gold-rimmed gaze flicking to her with calculating gleam. "Or join the victors, Pathfinder. Speak for me. Unbind the court's chains under my rule. Power, not this sentimental rot." Draven's crimson eyes met hers across the melee, not with command, but with the raw vulnerability of a king stripped bare, guilt etching deeper than Thorn's blade, his form unyielding yet trembling from the poison's lingering bite. In that gaze, she saw the mirror of her soul, the ethical melancholy of one who had borne solitude's lash, the duty that chained him to a crumbling throne. No demand, only the silent offering of union, a shared rebirth where love was not conquest, but the mercy of mending what rejection had torn. The wind infiltrated the cavern's wounds, carrying Wivios from the Iron Fang peaks, mournful calls that synced with her pulse, the moon's silver light painting their bloodied forms in ethereal strokes. Empathy surged, visceral as the blood pooling at her feet, thawing the ice of her exile. She had run from the pack's scorn, rationalizing her gift as curse. But here, in this crucible of stone and shadow, it bloomed into purpose. The pendant flared, drawing from her essence like a lover's desperate grasp, and Ilara stepped forward, the dead tongue rising unbidden, not as weapon, but as salve. "Vespera noctis, vincula redempta, sanguis et lumen in unum," she intoned, the words weaving silk and iron, tasting of frost-kissed iron and blooming nightshade. They flowed not in fury, but forgiveness, a moral alchemy, choosing compassion over war's red harvest. The invocation erupted in a cascade of silver light, tendrils of shadow unfurling from the pendant like roots seeking soil, wrapping Thorn and Garrick in luminous bonds that did not rend but revealed. Thorn staggered, his saber clattering to the stone, gold eyes widening as visions assailed him. The ritual's true intent. A pact of eternal guardianship twisted by his ambition, the court's fractures born of his greed. He clutched his head, whispering denials that dissolved into sobs, the betrayer's armor cracking under the weight of unveiled truth. Garrick howled, spectral thorns of memory piercing his pride. The pack's hunts failed not by her curse, but his fear of change. The borders he ignored crumbling under unchecked rivals. He dropped to his knees, claws retracting, the alpha's snarl yielding to shame's quiet burn. The betas fell back, illusions of loyalty shattering, fleeing into the storm with whimpers that echoed like fading howls. Draven slumped against the wall, the ichor evaporating from his veins in wisps of dark smoke, his wound knitting with unnatural grace as the curse's core unraveled. Ilara rushed to him, her hands framing his face, the cool marble of his skin warming under her touch, a tentative fire kindling in the void. Tears traced her cheeks, hot against the cavern's damp, mingling with the blood on his lips, hers and his, a sacrament of union. "I chose you," she whispered, voice breaking like first thaw, the bond solidifying, instinctive pull accepted at last. Not as slave or key, but equal in redemption's forge, her rejection reborn as the strength to heal his endless night. He drew her close, forehead to hers, the melancholy in his eyes yielding to a dawn's fragile light, guilt transmuted into gratitude. "And I choose mercy through you," he murmured, his breath a cool zephyr against her scar, now glowing silver in harmony with the pendant's steady ember. The cavern stilled, the avalanche's remnants settling like a shroud lifted, moonlight spilling full through the cleared entrance, bathing them in prismatic glow. Outside, the storm abated, wind sighing into silence, the blood moon's crimson fading to silver promise. Thorn rose unsteadily, offering a bowed head, not submission, but the first step toward atonement, his voice hoarse. "Brother, the court awaits your word." Garrick met her gaze, no longer scornful, but humbled, a nod acknowledging the pathfinder she had always been. Alara leaned into Draven's embrace, the cloak's tatters falling away like shed skins. Their forms entwined against the stone, a tableau of sacrifice and healing, where love proved not reward, but the profound choice to weave shadows into light. The pendant cooled to a gentle warmth, its runes etching a final symbol on her heart, rebirth from exile's frost. In the quiet aftermath, as distant Weavios celebrated under the moon's watchful eye, she knew freedom was not solitude's flight,